we can go ahead and get started. So my name is Austin. I'm one of the M3 AOA members. I'll be the one doing the talking, but we have a couple other ones here too. So if somebody else pops on and starts talking, they're probably also an AOA. So we're going to talk a little bit about the selection criteria for getting into AOA, and then also just a little bit of background about what AOA is and kind of the basics. So with that said, what is AOA? So AOA is the oldest medical honor society, and it's recognized nationally. So if you look at the NRMP, which is the match statistics stuff, you'll see that AOA is actually listed on there. So it is something that's kind of kept record of and tracked. And then if you look on AOA's website, they'll say that they're dedicated to improving care in the profession of medicine by doing these following 5 things: recognizing high educational achievement, honoring gifted teachers, encouraging the development of leaders, supporting ideals of humanism, and promoting service to others. Unfortunately, there is a cap on what percentage of your graduating class can be admitted into AOA, and it's 20%. I believe our school does 20%. Some do less than that, but I think our school is 20%. So why should you care? It's because AOA can do a lot of different things for you. One of them being there's lots of different scholarships you can apply for through AOA if you're a member. If you're trying to do research and trying to get some funding, there's also a lot of grants that are available. And even if you just have a project that's not necessarily research, there's also grants for that. So there's something to keep in mind. And then probably the main thing that the most people talk about is the significant boost to your residency application. And like I said earlier, the NRMP, I think, keeps track of all of this and all the match statistics on it. So you can see some of the really competitive specialties: derm, orthopedic surgery. A pretty high percentage of people who match in it are also AOA members. That said, there's still people who are in AOA who don't match into those specialties. So it's not the end all be all, and there's still more people who match into the specialty that aren't in AOA. But of note, it does help quite a bit. When I was putting together this presentation, I looked through a lot of different specialties, and I'd say that radiology and internal medicine are kind of your standard middle of the road. You see, maybe 20% of people that match into the specialty are AOA, and then of the people who don't match, it's usually 3, 4, 5%. So if you're trying to go into a really competitive specialty, it might be helpful, or if you're trying to get into a really competitive program, it can be helpful. So now that you hopefully want to get into AOA, here's kind of the process for how that happens. So if you're first or second year watching, what you're going to want to do is get 7 or more top performances on your PCSE, CNSEs, and then you'll be inducted in your 3rd year, and top performance is top 25%. And then if you're a 3rd year watching and you want to get in your 4th year before you start applying to residencies, you just need to honor 3 or more required clerkships. And there's 7 required clerkships for those of you in 1st and 2nd year. And then in recent years, there's also a new pathway you can do it by. It's a nomination by community assistant deans. So in East Lansing, that's Holly and Corey. I'm sorry, I don't know who all the other community assistant deans are. But basically, this was set up for students who do really, really well on their clinical evaluations. They're always getting above expectations for lots of things and always receiving amazing feedback, but maybe they don't test that well. So this was started just kind of in recent years. And last year, 6 out of 32 nominees were inducted via this route. So it's not like it's a rare thing that never happens. So if you're really nervous about how I feel like I don't test well, you still have a way in, and that's something that we're continuing to work on as kind of an AOA chapter. So that's just kind of the nomination process. After the nomination process, there's selection, because sometimes more people are nominated than can be actually inducted into AOA because of that cap that I talked about earlier. So then when we're going through the nomination, there's kind of 4 broad categories that go into that. And that's academic excellence, research, teaching and curriculum development, and outstanding service and leadership. And all of this is specific to MSU too. So if you have friends at another medical school who talk about what their school's requirements are, they might be vastly different from this. It's all pretty personalized from school to school. So starting out with academic excellence, there's 3 or more honors and required clerkship. Everybody's gonna kind of pick up those points. And then there's also academic honors and awards. So things like Gold Humanism, Excellent Clinical Skills Award was another one I found. And then you can also get a point for receiving scholarships. Just a quick note before I move on. I included points in here just to kind of give you guys a sense of the weight of different things, not so that you can try and calculate your own points. If I was watching this first and second year, I would be a person trying to calculate my points in real time as I watched it. This is just give you an idea of the weight. This is an ever-changing criteria, so you can calculate it, but it might be different when you apply. It's again, just kind of get an idea of what things they're looking at a little bit more favorably versus other things that they're still looking at as positive, but maybe not quite as much. So with that said, we'll move on to research. And the points are kind of all over for this one, so I cut a lot of them out. But in general, you want to do high quality research to get more points. So things where you're working on trying to get IRB approval, things where they're going to eventually be published, things where you're trying to get funding, all of that will kind of increase the points of your research. And then you can also get kind of points towards being inducted by doing different presentations. So if you're presenting at a national conference, you get 2 points, regional conference, 1 point. I think that you can actually count your like M1 presentation that you do as a presentation. It's required, and you have to say that when you put it down in the nomination stuff, but you can slap it down there and get a point for it. So just something to keep in mind. Then teaching and curriculum development. So if you've ever organized a CHM elective like the suturing stuff, suturing clinics, those sort of things, or the radiology elective that we had a while ago, you can put down some points for that. Assistantships like being a blue coat, tutoring. So if you were a tutor working with academic achievement, or you do any of the approach the question sessions. And then there's also JIT squad stuff and other curriculum stuff. You can also pick up a point there. And then finally, we have outstanding service and leadership. So kind of starting off with leadership, if you're a leader in any regional, national, international group, you can put that down, get some points for that, as well as if you're a leader in any MSU, CHM specific group, and even just being a member, you can pick up a point for that. So, and then finally, we have our service stuff. So if you're doing service hours beyond what's required by the curriculum, 10 to 20 hours, you get a point. More than 20 hours, you get 2 points. So just some more kind of easy stuff. If volunteering is really your thing, you can also get inducted off that sort of thing. So like I said, I don't want anybody to get too bogged down in the points. I included them just because I had them and I thought it was kind of the best way to show the weights and different things. But really, if you were just trying to think of a general broad stroke, kind of what sort of things do you want to be doing? You want to be trying to achieve academic excellence. And the way how the school tries to gauge that is through awards, honors, scholarships, that sort of thing. But if you're doing research and you're wondering, is this going to be a good research project? It's going to be things like getting it through IRB approval, trying to get funding for it, getting it published, and doing presentations. That said, you can still do just a simple case study if it's like something interesting. And if you get it published and do a presentation, you can get plenty of points for that. So it's not like you should shy away from research opportunities either. Just know that different things have different kind of favorability scores, I guess. And then teaching and curriculum development, trying to put on CHM electives, trying to become a blue coat, do those sort of things. And then tutoring, curriculum assistance. And then outstanding service and leadership. Again, it's just trying to get in leadership positions, but even if you don't get a leadership position, just being a member is still looked on as a good thing. And then as always, trying to do service for others. And that's kind of a good thing to keep in mind. So a couple of miscellaneous things I want to mention, because I talked to Dr. Barry, who runs a lot of kind of the logistics of these things and considers a lot of what goes into the nomination process. Applications are blinded to the committee members who are evaluating them. So they pretty much just get data, and they're supposed to just kind of objectively look at these things that you put down when you applied to be nominated to AOA and score them based on the system that kind of we talked about, and it'll probably be a little bit different, but either way. And then committee members undergo training to improve inter-rater reliability. So it's really all geared towards trying to give everybody as fair of a shake as possible. And if there's a weird discrepancy in the ratings, and they'll go back and recheck it and go through it and see kind of who went one way and who went the other way and which way seems to be the right way to do it. And then just a couple of pointers that kind of the M3s thought of, plus things that Dr. Berry mentioned, is be a self-advocate to a mentor, so that they're aware of your work, especially your community assistant deans, since that is a way to be nominated. If you're doing some really awesome research or a really awesome service project or something like that, make sure they know it, and you could get a nomination out of it and you could be inducted into AOA because of it. So don't think just because you're not killing tests all the time, you're not AOA material. That's not the truth. You can still get in, still be inducted. And then sustained activity over time tends to be preferable to small acts, and just you'll ultimately end up getting kind of higher scores on things. And then one more time, because I really wanted to pound it home, don't focus too much on the small details. This is an ever-changing criteria, and I'm sure it'll be much different when you guys apply. Well, not much different, but at least some. And one reason for that is the diversity and inclusion in AOA. It's historically been a problem in a lot of different chapters in a lot of different medical schools, and some medical schools have done away with it entirely. At MSU, we've been trying to keep it going and continue to work on it. Like I said, I talked to Dr. Berry, who handles a lot of the logistics and a lot of things about this. This is really his passion. He talked to me about it for like an hour just on a random weeknight and was just elated to do it. So that said, if you've gone through this presentation and you think there's any massive holes or you have any major concerns with the selection process, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to any of the other M3 AOA members, and we can pass it along to either the rest of the AOA committee or Dr. Berry, and we can kind of work on it from there, because that is something that we need to continue to work on in AOA as a society as a whole, and as well in our small little chapter here at MSU. So with that said, does anybody have any questions? I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so I can see easier.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, this is kind of a specific question, I guess, for MS3s, but is the surgery 1 and surgery 2 clerkships, are those, if you honor both, are those counted as 2 separate clerkships?
So I want to say they're probably 2 separate. Sorry, Rob.
They are. They're 2 separate, because the first one, in order to honor, you have to honor your oral boards. And then the second one, whether or not you honor, has to do if you honor your shelf, which has a specific score. And then each rotation has, I mean, it kind of seems like so far different scores to to honor it. So some is like 80%, some are 87%, some are 83%, but then you also have to do like an H&P, that kind of thing. So it can vary.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to read a question we have from someone. How early is too early to start thinking about AOA is the gist of the question. So yeah, Austin, you can take that if you want.
Okay. I mean, this is somewhat of an opinion question probably, but I mean, it's not something that necessarily needs to be stressful and super anxiety provoking. It's just something that kind of can occur slowly over long term. Just doing a project here, doing a project there. You don't need to try and do everything that we talked about right now all at once, but if you start thinking about it early and just trying to get involved maybe with some volunteer activities early on when you don't have the opportunity to do research, that sort of thing, it probably work out better for you in the long run, but there might be other people who have differing opinions on
it. I would agree with that. And I'd say something a lot of people fall into is once they get their first good CNSE score and they think, oh, I'll just go as fast as I can the next one because I already passed the semester. What's the point? I mean, each of those count as opportunities you could be getting in that top 25%. So just make sure you're working hard at all testing opportunities and then getting involved in organizations like Austin was saying.
And I'm not really sure. Sorry, Austin. I was just going to read that question about clarifying the 7 or more top performances. Do you know specifically, Austin? I would imagine it would be like each one because 7 seems like a lot.
Yeah, I think it's all separately. Like if you like PCSE, CNSE are separate. So if you honor the clinical one and then don't honor the CNSE, you still get a point for that. And then I had a question directly to me. Are these slides going to be available? I can make the slides available, and then we're also going to post a recording of this, so everybody will be able to take a look at it.
And then there's a question, the next one in the chat is how many people become AOA members each year? I know you said 20% overall. Is it 20% are inducted each year, or 20% at a time can be members of AOA?
So I think it's like 20% can be members. So you could, yeah, like the total graduating class. So like the M3s, there's already a couple of us in there. So like maybe 19% more of the class could be inducted, or however that math shakes out.
Yeah, so our M3 class had 8 members, and so then the other 20%, like, you know, minus whatever was already inducted, would be available. I think yeah.
And then Joe answered the next one about the NRMP stats. I also looked at the questions that some people submitted, if no one has a question right now. And I think some of the questions were really answered by Austin's presentation. I think a lot of people wanted a little bit more transparency with the AOA process, how you can qualify. So I think that's all been covered pretty well. A couple things that people expressed concern about is, number one, mentorship, especially for first generation students. Which is something that we're working on. I sent out a survey to all of the AOA members to get a membership profile. And then in that survey, I also asked them if they would be interested in mentorship. And about 75% said that they would be. So we will try to set something up to where we can match people that are interested with being paired up with a mentor to ask questions and things like that. So we'll probably just end up sending out a survey to everyone and asking if they're interested in just matching people up. Another question that came up was regarding research. A lot of people said they really didn't feel like getting research opportunities was easy, especially if you came into med school not really doing research, that was the case for me. I'd never done any research before. And so I asked a lot of the AOA inductees, how did you go about it? And basically just looking at the bar graph of things, most people, about 61% of people said that MSU assisted them, because there is a way that you can, there's a form that you can fill out that basically goes to the research office, and they can try to pair you up with someone that's doing research in an area of interest to you. A lot of people, though, like 53% of people, said that they just emailed physicians and researchers that they worked with in the past on projects. Or maybe people that they just encountered, because, you know, we have a lot of interaction with clinical people in our first and second year. And so those people, especially if they're in the hospital and your M2 year, that's a really great opportunity to kind of network and tell them, like, hey, if you're doing a case report, I'd love to help you write it up. That's really as easy as it is, because they don't want to write it up. So they would love to have a med student write it up and for them. And that gives you guidance, because then they can help you write it, because it's kind of tough when you don't know like how to write it, how to keep it within the certain word count, etc. And I know personally, like I got, I think 1 or 2 from a resident that I met on the internal medicine rotation in M2 year. So those experiences, just watch out for them and just, you know, pursue people. And then some people just came up with their own hypothesis, like they saw something clinically, kind of like MSU kind of tells you to do for that M1 project. It works. So you just kind of see something and you ask yourself a question, then you kind of discuss with the attending or a resident you're working with, and they might be like, yeah, that does sound interesting. Like you should kind of whatever. I would love to be like your mentor for it or whatever. And then you just set up meetings with them and things like that. And they can kind of walk you through the process if you need to get like IRB approval or whatever else. And yeah, and then some people just reach out to residents in their field of interest. Yeah, or even if you have friends that are working on an area of research, some people said that, like if they had a classmate that expressed that they were doing something research related and you were interested in the project, I mean, the more people that are on a research project, the more it kind of lightens the load. Obviously, you don't want like 10 people necessarily, because then you have to figure out authorship, but it's still nice to have a few people on with you because then you don't have to do everything by yourself. Does anybody have any questions that came up about that?
And I can add a little bit more about the research that we're planning on doing. Our plan is to host a symposium in the fall. So another thing that's really helpful for research that Austin's presentation indicated is that research experiences and then posters, publications, and abstracts are counted differently. And you'll see that when you look at the charting the outcomes of the match, right? So research experiences and then having a publication, a presentation, or an abstract submitted are counted in 2 different categories. So even if it's, you know, a QI project that you're doing for your first year, like that presentation counts different than you doing a research experience. So if you do conduct research, we really recommend, like, even if it's just a small little local conference, you know, submit your abstract, see if you can get a poster presentation out of it and really work for that. And then I know it's also, like Rodwell was saying, not a lot of people have experience with research. So I'm working to try and find a group of people who have or feel comfortable conducting research and like developing hypotheses independently of like a PI, and see if we can put on like a workshop for that kind of idea, kind of walk our way through how to do a, you know, just for an example, like how to come up with a project idea, how to develop that project idea, how to go about getting data, or how to go about getting a mentor. We'll kind of walk through that process. So that's another couple of other things that we have kind of on our plans for improving the research aspects of things at CHM.
And something else too is that for that M1 project, if there are physicians that are in that field related to whatever you did your M1 project on, you should, if it's like IM related or family medicine related, et cetera, they know about a lot of research symposiums that are even just local hospital research symposiums, which are usually pretty easy to get accepted abstracts into. And so they could recommend for you, like, oh yeah, there's this one that's coming up in April or March or whatever else. And you could submit what your like work that you already did for M1, just kind of polish it and submit that. And then that could get you a presentation as well. So you kind of get to double dip a little bit.
And then I had a direct question about if nominations are at the end of second year or during third year. And it's kind of a combination. So there's a small portion of nominations during second year and then a larger portion of nominations again in your third year. So you kind of have 2 opportunities to be nominated.
Then another question I had is, does nomination/induction happen once per year? Is it on a rolling basis? It's a once per year kind of thing. I don't know exactly when they grab the data to do it. I'm assuming it's probably kind of like at the end of the year so that everybody has as much opportunity as possible.
And I guess to talk more about the application process, once you're nominated, if anyone's applied for scholarships, it's kind of a similar process as scholarship applications. You are linked to some type of form where you fill out basically all your experiences and all the projects, everything we just discussed, you have to write about that. So just like little short paragraphs about your experiences, kind of putting it all together. And I'm trying to remember when we got that. And I want to say it was like late
summertime. I
summertime.
would say, like, yeah,
Summertime.
June, July.
So, and also, I mean, I didn't know this, but from Austin's presentation, like all of those groups, you know, that everyone's emailing to for people to apply to, like leadership opportunities for EMIG, AMWA, you know, interest groups, etc. I think those all count, right, Austin, based on your presentation?
Yeah, you can get all sorts of good stuff for those. So.
And especially if you're, you know, M1s, M2s early on, and you have a pretty good idea of what specialty you're interested in, there are a lot of leadership positions outside of just CHM. So you can try and go for more of like a regional leadership position. I don't know if you hear my dog, sorry. And that can be helpful too for the points. We can stop the recording if you guys want, and then just have an opportunity for you to ask some more questions that won't be recorded. So does anyone want to ask anything before I stop the recording?
Does anybody want anything on the record?
Yeah, so we have a question. The difference between a research experience versus a presentation and a publication. Yeah. Thanks, Michaela. So a research experience is anytime you're doing research, basically anytime you're partaking in research, just doing it itself is an experience. If you write up a poster, you submit it somewhere, and then you have the opportunity to present it like you did for your M1 poster presentations, that's considered a presentation. A publication is when you write up an abstract or a manuscript, and that's accepted by some type of journal or conference, and that's published. That would be a publication. So for one research experience, you could have something in all three categories.
And a good trick is to try and present aspects of the data. Don't present your whole project at once. So then you can get multiple presentations out of it. And then you just change the title and then it counts as two things.
Yeah, and that's also why you see a lot of, like, when you're looking at that NRMP match data, that's why you see so many publication or so many like research experiences and all of that stuff. That's why some of those are high in the more competitive specialties, is because they get, 3 points for, like one project. So just keep that in mind. It's not like you have to have like 20 first author publications, anything like that. And also something else is, when we filled out the application, yes, quantity comes into play a little bit, but also quality. I mean, if you really take part in whatever, leadership you have or research, I mean, that really comes through on the when you fill out the form. So it's not just trying to get as many as you can, but really make sure that you're focusing on that quality as well.
As far as what,
So,
oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as far as what AOA membership entails, as Austin kind of said in the beginning, there are some things that you have access to during med school, like you can apply to more scholarships, you have access to research grants. It's also kind of the benefit of like a fraternity or sorority where you get kind of a network of people where you can reach out just by them being AOA members as well. You get a magazine called The Pharaoh, which is kind of cool. Honestly, I have been reading it and they're fun. Yeah, if anyone else wants to jump in.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's what I noticed when you go on the website and you actually register as like an actual like AOA member. There's like a bunch of links on there, and that's what it has. I think it just provides you with an opportunity to connect with other AOA members, and there are AOA members that do hold like leadership positions, which could be beneficial for you in the future. Because if you haven't noticed yet, you will eventually. That networking can often really propel you in certain fields a lot more than just hard work. Unfortunately, like, hard work is great, but the combination of hard work and networking with people really can get you a lot farther, especially if you want to do specific niche things, or if you want to do academia, things like that. I think the more kind of honor society type things you can have, whether it's gold humanism or AOA, or just things like that, I think is just helpful. And then on top of it, which I didn't know when we got inducted into AOA, is that we work with, I don't know what Dr. Frenchick is considered exactly. He's like our AOA, what's the official verb? I don't know. But so we're working with him. What is it?
Chancellor.
Chancellor. Wow, I would have never guessed that. So he's our AOE guru. I like guru. And so essentially we've been working on like, what do you guys want to see? How do we help you guys also excel in the things that AOA says they care about, which is research, academia, and then like community service, essentially. And so we've been talking about creating a centralized place for volunteer opportunities, creating website, because we're going to have like a link on JIT, I think, for like an AOA page, and we're hoping to get approval from all the AOA inductees to give us their profiles so that you guys can have a better idea of types of things everybody was involved in. Helping you connect with research people, helping you just connect with whether it's residents that were AOA members before or something like that in a field of interest, if you have like a very specific interest like neurosurgery or who knows what. And also just creating resources that are helpful. I'm sure everyone that's an M1 has seen like the C3 document thing that is linked with Boards and Beyond and Sketchy and things like that. We kind of wanted to make a cleaner version that goes all the way through M2, just things like that. So being part of AOA means like we're doing all of that work right now so that we can kind of get people connected with those resources.
All right, any last on the record questions? So we had a question, when are you inducted? Yeah, when in
It is
the
in the fall.
Mid-October? Was that mid-October?
November,
November, yeah.
November. Yeah.
November 14th, I think it was this year.
that memory, Joe?
Sorry, did we talk about the membership fees at all?
No, go ahead.
So I think it's just a small point to bring up. There is like your invitation into AOA once you are once you like meet all of these requirements and like you're selected by the MSU committee, but then to like be a member of the actual organization requires a membership fee. And those are two separate things. So if you want to take advantage of like all those networking opportunities and all like the perks that the professional organization offers, then you would buy into that membership. But getting AOA as part of MSU also gives you the benefits of like putting that on your CV and like being able to show residencies that you're applying to that you like have like these really great qualities that they're looking for.
Thanks, Jan. And we had another question about if it's October, November that they're inducted, how does that work for fourth years with submitting their residency apps? We were inducted after we found out we'd been selected. Does anyone remember when we found out we were selected? Because then you'd be able to put that on your resume.
It was
So,
before the due date.
yeah, because I had like in June, it was like late June, early July is when I got the nomination email. And then, yeah, it was September 11th is when they sent out, congrats, you're in. So, yeah.
ERAS is due, I think you can submit September 15th, but September 29th, I believe, is technically I don't know what it is this year, but I think last year that's roughly what it was.
So you'll more than likely get it just before you submit. So you real quick pencil that in and then submit.
As Felipe is saying, I don't know if the recording is going to include comments. You can update programs as you go throughout the application cycle. So if you get any new awards or recognitions, it's actually a great time for you to email the programs you're really interested in and be like, hey, guess what? I just got this. All right, well, thank you everyone for your questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.